Welcome to this episode of the Uncharted 80s podcast. It's me, Martin, and I'm joined again by my good mate, Noel. How you doing, Noel?
I'm good, mate. Thank you.
So today's episode is about the men they couldn't hang.
When your eyes behold this letter, I'll be deep within my grave. I've nothing left to give you but for one last thing I've saved. In the corner of the cellar, look inside the iron chest. Bearing 7 silver medals, there lies wrapped the wooden crest. From the father to the son, like a bullet from a gun. 7 silver crosses hammered on a wooden one. The name on the last medal is a man I never knew, though I bore his name in nature and his conscience as I grew. When they shipped him back from Passion down, it was raining in his head, caused not by any bullet, but the faces of the dead. From the father to the son, like a bullet from a gun. 7 silver crosses hammered on.
Great
Now,
band.
I think we both know them, and I think it's also worth mentioning that we're interviewing a couple of members of the band, Paul Simmonds and Swill Odgers from the band. Let's get into it. I'd never heard of them, right? So back in the early 80s, they sort of started in 84-ish, 1984, and then they went through to sort of early 90s, 91, and then they sort of stopped, and then they restarted again in 96. I also had never heard of them, never seen them. I just really liked the name.
Yes.
So that's what attracted me to the band in the first place. And I'd never heard them. And I bought their debut album, never heard their songs, never heard their music. And I just thought, I love the name of the band. And of course, in those days, records were a little bit cheaper, weren't they?
Well, they were. I mean, I've done that in the past. A couple of times I've bought albums just on the strength of, the cover looks good, they look pretty cool. Play it, absolute load of rubbish, straight to the charity shop. So you hit the jackpot there.
If you look at the original lineup, it was Stefan Cush on vocals and guitar, Swill Odgers on, interestingly enough, vocals, guitar, tin whistle and melodica, Paul Simmonds on guitar and keyboards, John Odgers, who was the drummer and percussion, and then Shan Bradley on bass. And they sort of formed, they were sort of squatting in Shepherd's Bush and that sort of busking scene that was going on around them. And they made their debut in 84 in supporting Pogues Mahone at the...
That's the Pogues. That's their original name. Yeah. Pogue Mahone means kiss my arse. That's what the Pogues comes from. Yeah, it's Gaelic. Yeah.
They basically then got to a point where they had a first single out called The Green Fields of France. I don't know if you've heard that song. Yeah,
I mean, that's a cover of a song written by Eric Bogle, who wrote and the band played Waltzing Matilda, which is a really sad song about the war, and it's about the Anzacs, actually, the Australian New Zealand troops at Gallipoli in the First World War, and about being basically slaughtered. And that's a really dramatic song. And similarly, the Green Fields of France is another song about the war, about the fallen soldiers of World War One. So another very poignant and great song.
Well, how do you do now, young Willie McBride? Do you mind if I sit down beside your graveside and rest for a while neath the warm summer sun? I've been walking all day and I'm nearly done. Well, I see by a gravestone you was only 19 when you joined the great fallen of 1916. Well, I hope you died well and I hope you died clean. Or Willie McBride, was it slow and obscene? Did they beat the drum slowly and play the pipe loudly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered you down? Did the band sound the last post and chorus?
because that did get a bit of airplay on our old friend John Peel. So it got a bit of airplay on Radio 1 for those listeners that don't know. But every year John Peel used to have what he called his festive 50 at the back end of each year, and it was always the
His favourite songs of the year,
favourite songs of the year, yeah. And that got to number 3 in that festive 50.
Yeah,
and it also became a number 1 in the UK indie chart. So
the independent chart, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So you could see they were starting to get some publicity and some profile.
Yeah, a bit of traction. Yeah.
Because they then into the following year, they then released their debut album, Night of a Thousand Candles, which was the one that I bought off the back of the name.
Right. Yeah.
And of course, they then released a song called Iron Masters.
Oh, this is an old story that's rarely ever told. The raping of the country of the valley. The men who came to reap with a musket and a Bible. They wanted to take the valley.
The valley, the valley. They wanted to take the valley. And oh, the Iron Masters, they always get their way. And so for a penance, all the people work the land, all the men and the women and the children. And on Sundays it was down to the chapel in the town. The preacher said, give generously, give generously, give generously. The people they gave generously. And oh, the Iron Masters, they always get their way. The Union men is secret on the dark side of the hill.
Yeah, that's a great song again. It's a lot of their songs are there's kind of a folk edge anyway. A lot of folk music is kind of political in its own way, you know. But this particular one was about the Industrial Revolution and about how the comparisons between that and the modern treatment of the working classes. That song was they originally wrote it and they had to re-record it so it would be played on the radio. And when they originally wrote it, they had a swear word in there, basically aimed at Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister, and they had to take it out and rewrite it so they could get some airplay on it. So yeah,
they followed it up with a song called Greenback Dollar, which, interesting enough, wasn't on the original album.
It was produced by the mighty Nick Lowe. I mean,
it was produced by
fantastic. It's got anything he's done is always fantastic. Yeah.
Their sort of second album was called How Green Is the Valley.
Oh yeah, they had the single The Ghosts of Cable Street on it. So Cable Street, especially for people who are not in the UK, in 1936 in the East End of London, there was like a lot of immigrants were living there. There's a big fascist uprising, and there were men in black shirts marching through the streets. And I think the police took the side of the fascists against the locals and the other anti-fascist groups. So it turned into a battle, as a song, the Battle of Cable Street.
England 1936, the grip of the Sabbath day. In London town, the only sound is a whisper in an alleyway. Men put on their gloves and boots, have a smoke before they go. From the west, there is a warning of a wind about to blow. Like seas are marching to the east, as is Mosley with his men, dressed in the clothes of deepest black, like a gathering hurricane. This is the British Union with its flag of black and red, a flag that casts a shadow in Berlin and in Madrid. Listen to the sound of marching feet and the voices of the ghosts of Cable Street. Precious stones and battles and the gun, with courage
bit of a dark history there in the UK, actually.
Because they also released Shirt of Blue off that album.
Again, talking about the background to the songs, that's about, in the UK, there was a miners' strike between 84 and 85. Not to be underestimated, it was absolutely massive. It impacted families all across the mining areas. It literally couldn't work and had no food and everything. It was pretty grim. So that's songs about that, the Shirt of Blue, yeah.
So that album and the first two albums was on Demon Records. And then in sort of 87, they then switched over to another record company, Magnet Records, and released, which I consider to be one of their great albums, which is Waiting for Bonaparte. And that had a track on it called The Colours.
Which I love. That's a great song. Yeah, it's about an English mutineer. He was a sailor during the Napoleonic Wars.
I am a member of the Council of the Naval Mutiny. I know traitor to my conscience, having done my sworn duty. These are my last words before the scaffold, and I charge you all to hear how a wretched British sailor became a citizen mutineer, pressed into service to carry powder. I was loyal to the crack of the whip. If I starved on the streets of Bristol, I'd starve worse on a British ship. Red is the colour of the new republic. Blue is the colour of the sea. White is the colour of my innocence. Not surrender to your mercy. I was woken from my misery by the words of Thomas Paine. On my barren soil they fell like the sweetest drops of rain. Red is the colour of the new republic. Blue is the colour of the sea. White is the colour of my innocence. Not surrender to...
They got blacklisted by BBC Radio 1 because of a line in it, which was, "You come here to watch me hang." Because at the time there was all this stuff going on in South Africa about the townships and the oppression there, and that was kind of poignant to something that was going on in South Africa. So the BBC couldn't play it because of that, or wouldn't play it because of that.
They write songs often with a meaning and with a background around political events and social history and so on. And that situation where they've had to change lyrics or they've had songs banned, they had one of their later songs banned called Rosettes because of some football hooliganism connotations.
Right. Yeah.
Back of that. And actually that was off their Silvertone album, which was sort of the following year, because they were churning out albums like year on year. I think that is the only album, interesting enough, that made the top 40.
UK top 40, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, so it got to number 38. It was still doing well in the indie charts. Got to number 2 in the indie charts. Now, one album, Noel, that I do want to talk about is the Domino Club.
Okay.
Now the Domino Club came after Silvertown in 1990. Nearly made the chart, got to number 53, but has got some once again some great songs. Lion and the Unicorn is a particularly great song.
Welcome friends from overseas, I'm your guide, I aim to please. I know what you want from me, sights and smiles and history. I'll take you down to the underground, that's where the spirit of the bliss is found. Hear those sirens over your head, see that platform, that's your bed. Who went mad, who's drowned in drink? Who's in a cage and who's extinct? Who ended up in a uniform? The lion and the unicorn. them up with a coat of paint. That white paint don't cover up dirt, bandages don't cover up hurt.
So I think I read about that album, tell me if I'm wrong, they had more of a rock sound and not so much of a folk sound. So I'm guessing they had no fiddle player on that one.
It is a little bit more rocky, that is true.
Yeah.
But they did have a fiddle player, a guy
right.
called Martin Bell, who was the fiddle player from the Wonder Stuff.
Ah, the Wonder Stuff, great band. Yeah, it's interesting because fiddle players, I mean, obviously a lot of their songs have got the fiddle on it. And is it Bobby Valentino played
Bobby
on a lot of
Valentino's
stuff?
almost like
Yeah.
he's not quite like the fifth Beatle,
Yeah.
but he's definitely like the unofficial member of the band because he's been on so many of their records. Of course, he's got a bit of pedigree, hasn't he?
Yeah, that's right. He co-wrote and played the fiddle on Young at Heart by the Bluebells.
Yeah, that's a great album, Domino Club.
I was looking through some of the gigs and stuff. They'd supported loads of people over time. The Mighty Smiths, Elvis Costello, and they've played in loads of different countries. But it's about that era that they supported David Bowie at Milton Keynes Bowl, actually, on the Sound and Vision tour.
Obviously, they did the David Bowie concert, and then the following year, they decided to split. So,
right.
And they released a live album, Alive O, and it was a good way to sort of sign off, I suppose. And then in sort of the mid-90s, 96, they decided to reform.
Cool.
But their original drummer, John Odgers, didn't join them. And
he was working with Therapy, the band Therapy, wasn't he?
He was working with Therapy, That's right. And they released an album called Never Born to Follow, which has got a song called Dennis Law and Ali McGraw on it.
Oh, wow.
And when you listen to the lyrics of it, it's literally like a homage to the 70s.
Curly-whirlies, Aztec bars. Was there really life on Mars? Jumping Jackie Palo, Jackson Brown. Hillman Hunters, Norman Hunter, Gary Sprake, Dennis Law and Ali McGraw and all of Hattie Jakes. Chippers, Tomahawks and Choppers, and Red Space Hoppers, Crosshopper, Pai Chang Hai. Confess you wore a rally jacket, is it all a blur? I'm gonna get a rally jacket, gonna get a girl. This time tomorrow's out of fashion. Everybody's future's in the breeze. I wanna live like all our yesterdays. In the 1970s.
They were also, at the same time, they were doing post 96, as well as the reformation of the band, they were also doing some side projects as well.
Yeah, because they kind of had that boost of about 96 time to get together, and they were doing a few things over the next few years. But then they had a kind of a bigger get together again in 2003, didn't they? When they came back with the Cherry Red Jukebox album,
and that had some great songs. And of course, now they're into the 2000s, and they weren't releasing albums as often as they were in the 80s. They then got to a stage where, towards the back end of those 2000s, 2009, they released an album called Devil on the Wind. Now, Devil on the Wind has got one of my all-time favourite songs of theirs, which actually is the title track, Devil on the Wind.
Mesopotamia, where the Euphrates River flows, in the land of Nebuchadnezzar, where the fires of Hades glow.
Yeah, and it's about that. I think it's in 2009. It was 25 years since they played their first gig at the Electric Ballroom supporting the Pogues, or Pogue Mahone, as you said. So yeah, it's pretty cool to go and play there again 25 years later as a kind of 25-year celebration.
You then sort of go forward to 2014, their 30th anniversary, and they released another album called The Defiant.
And
This
back in
year.
2018, they released Cock a Hoop as well, another album, didn't they?
They did. They've just in the process of celebrating their 40th anniversary.
Wow.
And they've just released a couple of best ofs, two like double vinyls,
Cool.
Volume 1 and Volume 2, of all of their greatest songs. Tragically, in 2021, Stefan Cush died after suffering a heart attack.
Wow, that's a shock, isn't it? Yeah.
But I think, the band have obviously decided to, and I know they've done this in his memory, to carry on.
But no, I mean, they've had a fantastic history. I mean, looking at the, obviously, we also always talk about John Peel, of course, and obviously they got on the Festive 50 and so on. But they also did 3 Peel sessions between 84 and 85. So, that was a great little boost for them at that era. And I think I was talking about gigs as well. Obviously, I mentioned they supported a few different bands, but they've toured in Europe, Canada, USA, Iceland, Egypt, and Estonia. And they've played loads of festivals, Glastonbury, they played Reading, Pink Pop, Cambridge Folk. And there's a festival that I've been to a couple of times called Bearded Theory in Derbyshire. And they've played there at least twice. It's a great little festival. Yeah, very cool.
Anyway, Noel, that's the band. Let's now talk to Paul and Phil.
Perfect.
So Paul and Phil, or do I call you Swill? Is that okay to do that?
Yeah, whatever you like. I mean, even my wife calls me Swill, and my kids too sometimes. So.
Oh right, okay.
So where did that come from? That nickname?
It's a long time ago when I was in my early teens. I used to work in a kitchen in a village called Hamble, which is in Southampton, and one of my jobs was washing the dishes, and also taking out the left food which went to the pig farm, and the bins that they're put in is called the Swill bins. My name's Phil. Everyone in that area had a nickname that would rhyme with your real name, and so I just got called Swill, and that was that really, really hot summer. I think it was 77, 76. So there was loads of flies around these bins and everything. It wasn't pleasant. When I moved to London, I told everyone my name was Phil, but as people came to London to visit me, as soon as they said, "All right, Swill," it stuck again. So there's no point. I release records under my real name, and I go in the credits, and men can hang as either my real name or have Swill in the middle, or just Swill. But most people call me Swill. It's not an insult.
That's good. Just checking.
So what were your early influences? What sort of bands or records were you listening to when you were younger?
So I think we probably come from the same. Paul and I met roughly when we were about 17. For me, it was listening to John Peel. The first thing I heard the drumming on In the City from the Jam. That really, I'd never heard anything quite like that. And then I went out and I bought Anarchy in the UK as a kind of novelty. I thought it would be a laugh from what I'd read about it. Thinking I'd bring it home and play it to my mates and say, "Oh, listen to this," all of that shite. And it turned my head completely. So that, and then throw the Clash into that mix, and that would be my influences. Paul?
For me, when I was 13, 14, Bowie, loved Bowie. I remember watching Starman on Top of the Pops, like so many people in our generation did, being completely wowed. And then went on and bought all of Bowie's albums. And then went into a massive period of loving Bob Dylan, which still happens to this very day. That's never ended. Those were my favorite artists up until pretty much similar to Swill, coming across the first wave of punk, in particular the Clash, definitely, but also the Jam and Generation X as well. And then that was what really kind of lit the fire to want to become a musician.
So your sound is very folky, I guess, so you could call it to some degree. And I love the Pogues, and I can see a kind of a kind of similarity, I guess. I mean, were you influenced by the Pogues as well? Because they were around at the same time, weren't they?
Yeah, I think that we started off at the same time. We were busking. We got to know the Pogues through Cush, really. Although it was all really starting off at the same sort of time. I think
Right.
our sound was a little bit more at that time we were influenced because we were busking. We were doing some kind of Frankie Lane songs and stuff like that, and a few Scottish songs and whatever kind of, and some Irish songs like, you know, Whiskey in the Jar and that. We were busking in Hammersmith, so that area was mainly a kind of an Irish community and a kind of transient community. So we were busking whatever we liked and whatever gave us the most in our hat. With the Pogues, we started doing a lot of stuff together. In fact, our first gig, you know, we had a couple of members of what would become the Pogues. At that point, they were Pogue Mahone playing with us. So we had their drumming with us. We had their accordion player with us too. And I think we sort of fell into that sound, although I think whether it was by, you know, intention or not, we had more of a, what we would think of as a kind of a British Celtic sound. So
Yes, yeah.
we were looking at particularly Paul with Welsh heritage, me with Scottish heritage and Irish. You know, that kind of came out, and we looked at songs from, if we were doing a trad song, we were looking at them from all over. I mean, Paul, you wrote a lot of lyrics, like Iron Masters was obviously set in Wales because you knew.
Yeah, so that based on stories, you know, from my family and so on. But just to briefly go back to, you know, the Pogues connection, it certainly was a strong social connection in the sense that there was a big social scene, and we're kind of part of that. But I did always feel that there were some important differences really between us. I think we had more of a kind of affection for some of the country stuff, as Swill mentioned, that we genuinely liked, that we probably first learned when we were busking 4 or 5 hours a day, not just a Frankie Lane, but you know, people like Ricky Nelson and Hank Snow and various others from that kind of mainstream country.
Yeah,
bit of bluegrass, bit of rockabilly as well, which we liked, and in fact in previous bands we'd mucked around with a bit of rockabilly as well. I don't think the Pogues had those influences as strongly as we did. They were much more Irish, and I think that, you know, as Phil said, we brought in influences from the other home nations as well.
Great stuff.
And there was a big drinking culture as well, and I think we were all big part of that. And that was our. You know, we could never outdrink the Pogues, but
no, that would be that way. We did have a very good try occasionally, but we were.
But Shane won.
We were defeated.
So I wanted to ask as well. So where did you get the name of the band from? It's a great name.
Well, there's many stories on that one. I mean, the truth probably is, I mean, I prefer the stories to the truth. And maybe that's my ethos in life, actually. But the truth is that it was a name that the Pogues had considered to use because our friend Cush was roadieing for them at the time. He was party to those discussions about, you know, what was their name going to be. And he was particularly fond of that one. Obviously, there's the Fairport Convention song, John Babacom Lee, the man that couldn't hang. And there's some other mythic tales as well, which, you know, I think that in the past we've kind of liked to keep it a bit vague as to where the name came from. But, you know, that's out now.
It was probably one of those drinking sessions we just can't remember.
Yeah, it's always a good answer.
And can we just say that you've mentioned him a couple of times. I'm so sorry for the loss of Cush. We were both devastated as well. So, but I just wanted to say that because I'm sure he'll crop up a few times.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks. He was obviously, you know, in those early days that we're currently discussing, you know, he was a very pivotal person and a great influence on both Swill and I, you know, personally as well as sort of professionally, and one of a kind.
Certainly the name was something that the reason I bought the first album was I'd never heard your music at all, and the thing that drew me in was the name of the band. So the fact that there's a mystique around it is fascinating.
Well, it's great because the name, you know, I don't know whether we've grown into the name or what, but it seems to suit us. It suits our kind of our mythology as well as our, you know, our politics and our way of life and so on. We've had managers and record companies begging us to change our name.
Yeah.
Even just call ourselves the Men.
No.
Anything.
I know.
Had agents saying it's too long to go on a poster. It will always be small. We had, you know, radio stations not playing us because it was after a news item, which was going to be about the Sharpeville Six, where someone was going to be hung. You know, one record company said, change your name to the Carpet Tiles. It doesn't matter what you're called, you know. But we stuck to our guns. And that's why we're here now.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And really, it's like the name found us, really, because it's very much, the name is very much tied up in our whole identity, you know, not just as a band, but as a group of people who are part of this whole thing, including our our fans or followers or whatever you want to call them, always becomes taking on a meaning all of its own. Being the men that couldn't hang. It's kind of it's an emblem really.
Yeah, well, I think you've now got that brand, haven't you, with the logo and everything. It's just fantastic. So, please don't change your name to the Carpet Tiles. So
But it is like that, and we're quite precious. And when you say the brand as well, we feel like, not a brand like Coca-Cola, but we feel like we have got,
yeah,
a brand. It's like a family. We've got a name to live up to. We don't, we're very precious about things. We might look like we're just having a laugh, 80-90% of the time, but Paul and myself and Ricky too, now that Cush is gone, we're like the kind of we're like the in Planet of the Apes, you've got the monkeys in charge there. We're the monkeys in charge.
Perfect.
So going back to those early days then, obviously, after you met and you decided on the name, what were they like, those early days? What were those gigs like in those, end of the punk era and starting into the sort of 80s?
Well, I mean, just they were euphoric and just crazy. It was really, really intense, for a few years at the beginning. It was like a kind of eruption, really.
Paul and myself had been in a band before. In fact, most of what became the Men That Couldn't Hang had been in a Southampton band called Catch 22. So my brother was also the drummer there, and he came into the Men That Couldn't Hang as a drummer. But we started off, very quickly. We were playing in the Clarendon and doing small gigs, but very quickly things exploded for us. And part of that was Phil Sherron introducing Elvis Costello to us, and Phil Sherron wasn't in the Pogues at the time. So we got signed up by Elvis Costello quite quickly, and we did a month of Sundays with Elvis Costello and the Pogues and ourselves at Hammersmith Hammersmith Palais, and then things moved, and suddenly we were like traveling all the time. We were doing fairly big venues in most places. I mean, for a bunch of young chaps, it was like the most exciting thing that could possibly happen to you. One minute you're living in a squat and you've got no money at all, and the next minute you're going all over the place playing to thousands of people who love you, and who get you. That's another thing. I think we probably thought we would have got us before, and suddenly we were amongst crowds of people who did.
It was all extremely fast as well. I mean, it happened very fast. I mean, in the September, we'd be just living in our little cold squat down in Hetley Road or somewhere in West London, maybe busking, and then by October we were playing at the Palais, and we were on John Peel, and we were the music papers, and it was just like a whirlwind, really.
A bit like all the things that we like. Your first question was like, what inspired you to start playing music and stuff, and it was a bit like all the things that we'd kind of dreamt of. It's like your tick list. You tick them off your list, like I always wanted to be on John Peel, but as soon as we're on John Peel, I thought, well, I always wanted to make a single, and we made a single. They always wanted to make an album, and then you always want, then you sort of almost run out of things that were on your list, or you want more, So yeah, it's like a dream, really, and it still is. It's amazing. We've still got people. We're on our 40th anniversary tour. People are still coming to see us. In fact, there's more people coming to see us, and we've even got a kind of, we've got almost 3 generations in some of our audiences. We've got young people, and we've got middle people, and then we've got old people like us. I remember that with our manager, with our second manager, Andrew Cheeseman, who used to manage the Damned. And he really tried, and I think the record companies tried too, to get us to go and hang out in, I can't remember what they were called, but the sort of trendy clubs in town where musicians hung out. And he really would, and lots of people would. And we never did that. We never so we didn't know many famous people, if you like, apart from maybe playing on the same, getting to know people on a festival bill, that sort of thing. But we never, ever chased people because we thought they could help us out. It was either through hard work, which didn't seem like hard work at all at the time, or it was by chance, or luck.
Well, so when you got to the stage where you could do, tick one of your list, which is the single. How did you get to the decision to do that first single?
Yeah.
The first single
Yeah.
was Costello. Really, we were in a studio in Wapping, and we'd recorded the album, and we recorded Greenfields, and and Walk and Talking was also on there, which was at one point was going to be the single. Because the other thing that was the buzz in where we were kind of, where we were gigging and everything was what they called at that time a cowpunk sound. But as Paul mentioned earlier, it's more of a rockabilly kind of sound. And I think that we probably thought that was going to be the single, but Elvis Costello said that if that was a single with the kind of climate it was at that time, it could possibly be a hit single. And he said it will label you as a kind of novelty band. You'll be stuck and you won't be able to move out of that bracket, for the 4 or 5 years that you might last, So we decided on the Greenfields of France, because it was 7 minutes long. It was an anti-war song. It was a slow song. It was a waltz. And we thought, well, it might give us a little bit, establish us a little bit, but not become anything more than a little, something just slightly under the radar. But I looked at something the other day, and it was, it was in the top of the indie charts for 6 months in this newspaper thing that I just read the other day. I think it was best part of 11 months. It was in the indie charts. It kind of did the opposite of what it was meant to, in a way.
Do you look back and think that was the right decision?
I don't know. Paul, what do you reckon?
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
that's one of the classic sliding doors questions, isn't it, really? I think you have to go with what you did anyway, but it's interesting to consider that had we maybe released Walking Talking and it had have gone on to have been a proper top 10 hit, what would have happened to us? Would we have disintegrated? Would we have become just a one-hit wonder, that you wouldn't even be seeking out to talk to today? Or might we have translated that into something bigger, But that's just an alternative universe, isn't it?
Well, there's nothing I can tell you that you don't already know. I'd like to tell you something, but I won't. Oh, I'm not gonna waste my time and breath to kill you. I got much better things to do. Like walking, talking, singing to myself. Walking through the country, catching flies. Dodging rain of pine hills, blazing on the grass. Entertaining my summer hours. Well, I'm fed up with the smoke. Lies, but up with dirty tales too. Now I hear about your money, I hear about your wife. I got much better things to do. Like walking, talking, and singing to myself. Walking through the country, catching flies. Dodging rain and fine hills and blazing on the grass. Entertaining my summer hours.
Because Shirt of Blue also is a great song. Yeah, that didn't chart, and I wondered if do you think it would now? Because there's a lot more folkier sort of stuff in the charts now.
I don't know. Maybe Shirt of Blue is a song specifically about the miners' strike. I don't think we put it out as a single, not in any way expecting it to be a hit. I don't think, as I remember back. I think you were proud that it had come out as a single. I don't know what MCA Records thought. Probably didn't really understand what to do. To us, it was an obvious single because it was one of the strongest songs we had at that time. And it told a story we wanted to tell and that we identified with. And it was much more about us building our identity, I think, with that rather than looking for, hits.
Funny enough, with that exact song, I was in Switzerland last week and I did a gig at the end of the week. And when I was putting the set list together, I had Shirt of Blue on there. And someone said, "Oh, don't do Shirt of Blue. The Swiss people, it's got no connection with Switzerland, and the Swiss people won't relate to it or really get it. And it's of a certain time and a certain place." But anyway, I did it anyway. And it went down fantastically well. And I think that people, it's a bit like Goes to Cable Street would be another one like that Paul wrote. I think that people get it because they get the passion in the song. And even if, we had songs like The Colours, that set hundreds of years in the past that maybe not, I suppose my point is, I think that it's the underlining passion in the songwriting and the performance of the songs that has kind of propelled the band.
I'd like to just say that whilst obviously Shirt of Blue on the surface, and also fairly deep down is a story of two protagonists in the miners' strike. I always used to say to people that it's just as much a story about two kids and friends growing up who end up on different sides, and that can translate, right across the board in any society, really. And so it's a common factor. And in fact, I think I have said this before, but not very often. The song that I kind of used as a sort of reference point when I was writing Shirt of Blue was Rolf Harris's Two Little Boys, which probably shouldn't really admit, I guess, these days. But at the time, it was, as you remember, it was a story about two kids on either side of the American Civil War.
Yeah,
it's ironic, Paul, because if that is you're kind of you're a little bit of a seed of the influence of that song. The song that you mentioned was Margaret Thatcher's favourite song, and Shirt of Blue is kind of the antithesis of Thatcherism.
Well, I like that. That's a really good thing. I think that's I like that coincidence. That sounds great to me. But so really, at the heart of it is a story about two kids growing up and what happens to them, and how they manage to maintain some kind of relationship despite their lives going in such opposite ways. And destiny or fate or something has got this thing in store for them where they have to kind of meet again in this crucible, or where their choices or what's happened to them come out into like full relief in the dramatic conclusion.
Now Tommy, have you got a new shirt? Is its color a fine bright blue? Has your mother sent you off to your school from the street with a pretty view? And shall we wrestle in the old schoolyard like the other children do? You can scuff your shoes, you can tear your hands, and they'll rip that shirt off you. Hey now, Tommy, since you moved away, they've taken our town and they made it new. Now there stands a chemical plant where the cherry orchards grew. And I married Lucy from the back of our class, who once wrote letters to you. We've got kids and we send them to school from the street with a pretty view. Oh, and your shirt of blue. Oh, and your shirt of blue. From the fields where the flowers strew, from a butterfly stick to a baton and a brick, changing uniforms far too soon. Hey now, Tommy, shall we meet again in the morning wet with you? The gates of the colliery.
Okay, so you get to your first single, and then you go into with Demon Records. You get your first album. What was that period like leading up to that first album?
It was we couldn't believe it was all happening. I think we were thinking when's it going to stop? When are we going to be found out that we're imposters of some sort?
I still wonder that to this day.
Yeah. But I think that like you say, we were sort of living out our dreams. Everything was great. I mean, I think we were very lucky with Demon because they were, a nurturing company. They were understanding. They wanted us to be ourselves. Some of the future companies weren't quite so nurturing and understanding. I think it would have been different if we'd been signed to MCA or someone like that straight away. But yeah, and we made a lot of good friends. It enabled us to go and make that first album within a budget that, it wasn't like a kind of Bad News, if you know the Bad News, which was like the British equivalent of Spinal Tap from the comic strip, to make it sound good without overloading it and, cut our teeth, if you like.
I think it was £12,000 was the whole budget for Night of a Thousand Candles, that inclusive of everything, including the promo, the recording, and some very sort of paltry kind of allowances for us. But it was an absolute fortune to us at that point. Don't forget, because we'd had absolutely nothing before that, and to have the ability to go into a studio day after day, maybe take a little more time than we were used to get things right. Not as much as we ended up taking when we went to some of the mega labels later on. But it was fascinating, and it's kind of we learned an awful lot. I think, making that record, we learned a lot.
I'm glad you mentioned record labels because you seem to have had a lot over the years. Why do you think that is?
They can't. They don't seem to know. They didn't seem to know how to make a buck out of us, really. I think that they were like, how do we make money out of them? And they couldn't hang, and they'd have a go and they'd fail. And then they go, oh, no, pass them on. And so somebody else would have a go. But we never had any shortage of people, wanting to take us on. It's just that they wouldn't stay the course,
And you asked earlier about, that first single. Was that, what if we'd done something else? Or, was it the right choice? I mean, looking back, I think we were probably, we were enticed to leave Demon. We might have been better staying with Demon, but we were young and they were very encouraging in many different ways, the sort of major labels. And as Paul said, we didn't stay on, I don't think we stayed on one for more than one album each of them, but there never seemed to be any trouble. We eventually went back to Silvertone, which is part of Demon, for a while, and then I think we just now, I mean, the truth is, and I bet just about any of the bands that you talk to would say this, you don't need a label anymore. As long as you've got, a foundation in music, we're our own label now, and we see more, return on it than we did on any of the albums we made on majors, because none of them, it would be impossible for them to break even, because the little tiny 4% or something that you get from a record company that's going to pay for everything, while they're kind of schmoozing on their 96%. It's virtually impossible to pay a label back. So we don't see a penny in royalties from any of the larger labels that we were on.
I mean, it's quite amusing to me because sometimes you get a view of the balance sheet that you have with somebody like, let's say, Warner Brothers, with whom we did Waiting for Bonaparte and what have you, and we are so much in debt with it. It's unbelievable. I mean, we still owe them over 100,000 or something like that. It's quite incredible, and we'll never pay it back, obviously. And it's absurd. And but really, and although we would have been better staying with Demon, of course, or with a similar label, we did enjoy. Well, I certainly did, going to studios like the Manor and other studios like the Townhouse and stuff, and getting to do that experience of making one of those kind of big 80s records, which I'm really pleased we did and I'm proud of. But God, we were we were the kiss of death to major labels. They took a big bath on us, really. But hey ho, they made it back on somebody else. Do you know what I mean?
Every time we speak to one of the bands and they've had a record label interference in inverted commas, that they've either tried to change their style, their sound, or push them into a completely different
Yeah.
direction. And I just despair at
I
the
mean,
because
Swill, you remember this, I'm certain.
Yeah.
Of course. I'm going to tell a little story about being summoned to Warner Brothers in Kensington High Street after being on their label for a while. And well, first of all, when we got there, we went up to the reception and said, "Oh, it's the Men That Can Hang. We've got a meeting with X." And the lady pulled out this huge, great book. And I had to thumb through all the N's and the M's until she came to our name. And oh, Man, they can hang you here. We went up to have the meeting with this guy whose name I can't remember, honestly. And he said, "Right, I'm going to name 3 songs
Yeah.
that I want you to consider for your next single. You have to choose one of them." And he named a song by a band called Big Trigger, I think they were called
It's
The
the band
Colours.
that did that song River.
Yeah,
Float
that
down the river in
band.
a dugout canoe. Yeah.
There were 2 others to this day I can't really remember that we didn't like any of them and said so, And he said, "Well, the thing is, I'm going to give you a week, and if I don't hear from you that you're going to choose one of these songs to do a cover of, I'll assume that you left the label."
Wow.
And so we left that meeting and immediately said to each other, even on the pavement, before we'd even got to the pub next door, "That's it. That's over, because we're not going to do one of those 3 songs. For sure, we're not going to." He said, "I guarantee we will chart it. We have the muscle at Warner Brothers. We'll get that track into the top 20. And, but you just have to play ball." And we took great pleasure in saying, "No way." I mean, in those days, perhaps we were kind of, I don't know, but it seemed fun to say no to the label and to know that we would be leaving what was the biggest record label in the world at the time. It felt validating, and I felt, oh, we're back. We're really the Men That Can Hang again, because we've said no to this label, and that's it for us. We'll be off that label in a week's time, and we were.
But you kept your integrity.
We'd have been much more upset by being banned from our local pub.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we took it in our stride. It was like, It was as if it was, oh, well, we've just left Warner Brothers, fine. What's next? What should we do now? I mean, I thought I still do think it's quite funny, because this guy, who's one of your classic 80s A&R guy, I wish I could remember his name, I'd happily say it. But when we went into his office, he had Whale Song playing on some kind of piped, and he had the classic, the baseball bat by the side of his desk, some kind of hangover from Led Zeppelin or something like that. I mean, this guy wouldn't last 10 seconds, in our local pub, by the way, baseball bat or not. And so, so that I just think that was a very good example of the Men That Can Hang, sticking to our guns and being helping us grow into our identity. The fact that we said no.
Great stuff. Yeah.
How bothered were you about that lack of chart success? Was it something that was important to you or not? It was probably more important to the labels, I get that, but what about you as a band?
I would have loved it, I would have liked to have had more chart success personally. I think that chart success is validating. It means you get to more people. As you extend your career, perhaps have more resources. It's good for the ego. And at one time, I very much would have liked to have had more chart success, because, I mean, if you look at the singles that we put out over the course of that 5 or 6 years, up until 1990 maybe, plenty of them were fairly squarely aimed at trying to get a hit on the radio, like A Place in the Sun, and a couple of the others. It just didn't work out, and we've actually had more success with the songs that were not intended to do that,
Rosettes was a big miss, it was a big shame, wasn't it?
Which one?
Rosettes.
Oh, well, that was circumstances, wasn't it? We had bad luck once again, as we did with The Colours, which was on the Radio 1 A-list until an incident in apartheid South Africa, which led to a mass arrest, was conflated with our name, and ruling came down, take them and they can hang off the playlist. That's a political name now, and we can't risk it. And then, of course, with Rosettes, we had Hillsborough. I remember we were all sat in the pub looking at the artwork of the single for Rosettes when Hillsborough was on the television in the pub, and before the end of that meeting, oh, it's not going to come out, is it?
We were 50 strong when we left our town. We took the train to the port. On the boat across, we were 48. 2 in the magistrate's court. 2 didn't get past the customs man. 3 got drunk in a hold. 4 got homesick straight away. 1 pair of feet got cold. Raising the flag while without regrets. Waving scarves, singing hard, wearing our rosettes. The riot squad had a team of dogs. They brought out the water hose. We declared a war and fought to a draw for the glory of the rose. 1 went down in a stumble, 2 went into the sea. 3 got scared and messed right there. 1 of them was me. Raising the flag while without regrets. Waving scarves, singing hard, wearing our rosettes.
I think that I mean, I felt, as Paul said as well, I still do to some degree, like a fake, or what's it called? The
Imposter syndrome.
imposter syndrome. But I think I'd got to the point where, I'd love to have seen a single in the charts, and probably more for any other reason than for my mum and dad to sort of for me to justify to them why I'd taken this route, and for them to be able to tell their friends. But I kind of felt it would never happen. But what I took more notice of was the reviews, gig reviews, or record reviews, and they were kind of much more disappointing. Sometimes you get a bad review where you just knew. Sometimes you knew the person hadn't been there if it was a gig. Sometimes you got a bad review when you just knew someone just wanted to give you a bad review. But we could tell that for one way or the other. Sometimes we'd even get the nod, but a regular reader wouldn't get that, so they just take it as read. The music press now is nothing. It has no power anymore, but in those days it was all powerful. And I must say, we had a lot of good help from the NME and the Melody Maker in particular, but sounds too in those days. Then there came a time maybe when some newer journalists came in, or the ones that had written about us had just written about us too many times, and it had always been good editorial control. So they said, right, well, let's put some new person in there. And there's other music coming along. The incredible thing is that we're still doing it, and we're still here. And Cush would be here as well if it hadn't been for the way the world turned. But some of these people who made scathing, nasty reviews of our craft, well, they're not working in their craft anymore.
No.
So that lead up then to that first iteration and the sort of split in the mid-90s. Then what was the lead up to that? I don't want to be painful and go through.
Well, no, it was just exhaustion, physical and mental. We did 5 albums in 5 years, and from 1986 onwards, we were constantly on the road as well, which was fun, but sometimes you can have too much fun, And we were just very, very exhausted by 1990, I think. And also the final album of that period, the Domino Club, had probably, as Will commented, the worst reviews of our entire career. I mean, it was across the board. Ironically enough, that album has now been reconsidered, and many of our fans have it as their favorite album of ours.
I love it.
At the time, it was just roundly condemned. And also, when we were recording that album, we were in the studio with the Stone Roses in the studio next door recording their album. And I guess, it felt a little bit like the changing of the guard, and a new generation was coming in to do something different, and we were old hat. And that feeling really, I suppose, combined with the bad reviews to sort of bring about a sense of kind of ennui, feeling of we've had a good run. Maybe we should leave it there.
With that intensive travelling, even though the amazing thing about the men that couldn't hang has always been they were all pals, we're all friends. We weren't thrown together through skills, that's for sure. We were through together because we all knew each other and we'd introduce friends into that circle. But, travelling through, all across Germany, all of Europe in the back of a sleeper bus, 24 hours a day, sometimes 7 days a week. Maybe if you're lucky, you might get a duff here and there. But it will test your friendship to the nth degree. You'll have heard every single joke that everyone's ever had, and you need to get a break from each other, or it will break the band. It breaks a lot of bands, and I think that some of us, not me or Paul, but some of us felt that maybe that was it. The weird thing was we would still be going to this famous pub together after just a few days apart, and sort of saying, and we couldn't go to a gig together. That'd be the worst thing, going to watch someone on stage, thinking, well, we should be up there, so and at that time that was a mistake, but it couldn't be any other way, because we'd have just had a breakdown, I think.
And possibly we did used to tour very intensely, to use the kind of metaphor, and maybe not all of us would have made it out. I think it was hardcore.
Yeah.
So, obviously, fast forward a bit from there, you obviously must have got the energy and the focus back again for the reunion. You must have, I guess it sounds like you didn't lose the passion, but it was more it just kind of wore you down a bit. But how did you get back to a stage of, reuniting and starting again?
I mean, very good money was offered. That's partly it. And we started to do a series of reunion shows that were very well attended. There was still, obviously, the audience hadn't gone away at all. And, we grew up a little bit, got our personal lives a little bit more together in most cases. And we figured, maybe there's more. It looks like there was 25 years more.
Yes.
But in some ways, we'd never really stopped, because we stopped for that while. But Paul and I carried on.
We had a band.
We had a band called Liberty Cage, which, so we continued to gig, a tour, and record. Other members of the band did other things, and we got back together, reasonably quickly, really. So it's not like the men have just reformed for our 40th anniversary. We've been gigging for years. But what we hadn't done is toured so extensively as we are now, for one reason or another. We're mainly gigging at a push. We'll do Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it's not like that'd be the most we would do in a week. It's not like that we would do in the old days. We couldn't do that. We don't drink so much. We don't go to bed so late. Well, at least we go to bed. But it's just that this tour is taking us to places that we haven't been before, and this is just still within the UK, because Brexit came along as well, of course, and made it very difficult for UK bands to get out of the UK and play.
Let's just talk a little bit about songwriting then, if we may. I just wondered how that's changed, if at all, over the years.
Not really. Don't think it's changed that much. Seemingly the same process, although we haven't really done much since Cush passed away, since Cock a Hoop.
I think the thing that has changed is the ability to make reasonably decent recordings at home. So instead of going into a rehearsal studio with the band and saying, here's my idea of a song, you can actually send them in advance and say, this is a song I'm working on, have a listen, and when we get together we'll all put our own ideas and do that. But as Paul says, our way of writing, which is one person, mainly Paul, brings a song to the band, and then we all work on that, and then we all put in our little bits. That way of working is still the same. We still use sort of topical themes and historical references too. And I think, even though I don't know where it can finish, but we still write from the heart as well. There's a lot of songs that people won't ever hear, because we're far worse critics on ourselves than anyone else could ever possibly be. It's quite hard sometimes. We are quite ruthless with each other, but we can take it. We've known each other for so long.
It also means that only the best stuff comes to the fore, which is that's probably a good filtering system, really, to have that.
And are you constantly writing, or do you do it in blocks or not?
Personally, I used to be constantly writing. Now it's much less, much more rare, I would say.
Yeah, I get for myself, I get moments of clarity. I get moments where I think, there's a song, and I'll work on something over a longer period of time. Also, I think we subconsciously at least try not to repeat ourselves. There's no point in writing, although there are sequels. Paul has written, there's
Yeah,
a
the sequels are good. They're
trilogy
good,
stuff and so on.
good fun
Yeah.
to do that. Yeah, we did going back to Coventry, which was followed by A Place in the Sun involving
Okay.
the same two characters, and then there was a third one, which was Great Expectations. That was the main one.
Also, I suppose as well that Paul mentioned Cush dying in 21, and Paul wrote a song called Red Kite or Red Kite Rising.
Whoa, 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 whoa. All across the land the alarms were ringing, sirens sounded and the clouds looked down. The birds in the hills were flipping and singing, something's coming, something's coming. We're not gonna sleep tonight. So here comes Stefan, out and Gethin, stretching in the wind like a willow tree, brushing off the ashes, looking at the fasces, and never stayed down the towy ground. Are you coming downtown with me? Yeah. Hail, hail, red kite high, over the river and up in the sky. All you tyrants are out of time. Look on the blue horizon, and you see the red kite rising.
Which is based on our experiences, and the feeling at Cush's funeral, because it was during lockdown, or lockdown was just loosening up a little, so 7 of us could go from England to Wales, and of course there was family members there and so on. I think we was allowed to have 20 or 30 altogether, but from out of town, 7 of us, and there was lots of us, it was a very obviously emotional experience, but there was a kind of there was spiritual too, and we thought about things very deeply, and so a song came out of that. But I suppose my point is as well is that at that time, and from that time for a couple of years, it was hard not to write a song that wasn't about Cush. We had to. We could probably write a whole album easily. We could write a whole album about that, but we have to keep a balance, as well as putting our emotions down on paper and down on vinyl or tape or digital or whatever it is.
I try to get myself these days when doing songwriting. I try to think about the life experiences of the people who come to see us as well, rather than just me. I've only rarely written about me. Occasionally I have, but mostly I try to put myself in somebody else's shoes, to try to find areas that I know that the people who are our natural constituency will also feel emotive about, and so that's why it takes longer now, because there's more to consider, and it's deeper.
How difficult was the decision to keep going with the band
After Cush?
Yeah.
So, well, that was a tough one, and I suppose to set the context, when we first got the call, we'd had a Zoom meeting with Cush just 3 days before he died. It was the first time Cush had ever done a Zoom meeting, and he only got in at the very end of it, and it was complete chaos. But it was like a big laughing party. We were just all laughing, and it was like we were all together, and we had all these plans we made, and for once we all agreed as well. We were going to do an acoustic album. We were going to go out and tour. We were going to do a medical like Burke, and it was really, really great. And then 3 days later, we got the call. Paul got a call first, and he called me, and then I had to call some other people in the band. And the way it hit you, it's like you just could not believe that it was true. And everything at that time, now looking back, has an element of unreality about it all. And I remember the first night I just listened to I stayed up, all day and all night, and I just listened to songs that we sung together. I listened to all the recordings we'd made together, and then when we could finally get together properly and talk about things, we just didn't know what to do. Also, you've got to remember as well that all our gigs had been, as every other band, there were gigs booked through COVID that never happened, so they were all rescheduled. So what we first decided to do was at least honor those commitments and go out and do these gigs as a send-off for Cush, and also as a way for the audience to get together, because people hadn't even been able to get together to grieve, and the first few gigs were, it was almost impossible to play. Everyone's, the audience were crying and we were crying, and there was lots of hugs going around. You've got to remember as well, people hadn't been able to touch each other even, so the whole thing was super charged emotionally. We just didn't know what to do. And I think, apart from lots of people say, please keep going, you're by this point we are like a family. I think it was a gig that we did in London where Cush's sons came up on stage and joined us for a song, and then afterwards we all had a chat, and they were saying keep going because it's a way of keeping our dad alive, keeping his memory alive. Not that it would fade anyway, but that's how I see it. I mean, Paul,
I can only concur with what you said. I remember playing up in Edinburgh on that sort of tour where we agreed that each night would be a kind of requiem, on that very first tour, and every night was an incredibly heightened feeling of emotions, and so I don't think I could ever do another tour quite like that. So it was definitely it took an awful lot.
I think it was the first gig that we did without Cush. We had to go we did a gig at the Robin too in Bilston, and it was an all-day festival indoors. And what happened is our equipment had been set up, but no one at that end had heard that Cush had passed, and so. All his stuff was set up. There was a microphone for him. The amp was set up, and everything. So we went on, and there's this massive gap between me and Ricky, which would have been, and it was just dreadful. But as a result of that, what we do now is we bring Cush's amp and Cush's guitar to every gig we do, and we set it up on, it's there on the stage, as if he decided to come and walk on that stage. He could pick it up and play it, but.
I remember just shaking every night before going on, just my hands shaking, everything shaking, just that kind of suppressed kind of feeling of, that feeling that it was almost impossible to do. But we forced ourselves, really, thanks to the audience in many ways, that we managed to do it.
Look, I know it was a tragedy and is a tragedy, but I'm glad you're doing it, and I'm glad you're for his memory. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's how we feel as well. That it's for his memory, and Cush is always with us in a way. We're always talking about him in the van. We joke about it, and he's such an integral part. It's like we decided we'd never replace him. There's no way that someone could be, and there was quite a few people offered, and we thought we can't have there's no point having like a Cush impersonator join the band. So we just we adapted, and we are the way we are. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about Bobby Valentino. I mean, fantastic fiddle player on loads of your songs. did you ever consider him making I know he's a session musician, but do you ever consider making him an official member of the band?
He is, really. I mean, we're out on tour now. He's with us every show. Well, actually, saying that, we had a couple of shows up in Lancashire just 2 weeks ago, and Bobby forgot. He forgot the shows. It just didn't turn up. But
we were waiting for him at the service station.
Yeah. He has just turned 70, so it's fair enough. But he kind of is in the band. That was how we managed to. One of the things we did in order to go forward from Cush was extend Bobby's role in the band, and that's worked out brilliantly. Really, he's, as you say, he's the best in the business, really.
Yeah, we're lucky to have him, and he's just not on the board where me and Paul are.
Yeah, no, he's the talent.
What's the reaction been to the anniversary gigs so far? Has it been pretty good?
Amazing.
No, well, they've all been outstanding, and we've been, really enthused by the crowd. We've played at places where we expected it to be not so full, and it has been full. We always think, well, there's going to be a bad one. It'll, it's bound to be, but yeah, it's just been outstanding.
So last question then is one we ask everybody that comes on the podcast, and that's you. What's your greatest memory that you've had up to this point?
With the band?
Yeah.
I think for me, I think it was that Rock Summer, it was called. We played in Estonia it was like their equivalent of it was the same size as Live Aid. It went out live all across Russia, Estonia, some of the Scandinavian countries, and it was just so huge, the crowd. But also I like the fact that the TV cameras were like something from the 1950s in the UK. They were like, the technology was so old school. But it's the nearest one to a gig where, and I don't think I was the only one, but for a split second thought, I cannot walk on stage, I can't do it. And then you just take that step and you're on, and it's all fine. That's mine.
I mean, I'm going to be cheeky and give you two, to be honest. The runner-up and the winner.
That's fine.
And so the runner-up would probably be when we supported David Bowie at Milton Keynes Bowl at the request of David Bowie's son, that we'd be on. And having been a very big Bowie fan when I was much younger, it was a tremendous thrill, to be stood on the side of the stage with Bowie's set list taped to the stage in front of me and performing, just before him. Slightly made more remarkable by the fact that Cush decided to play the Laughing Gnome at that gig, which had been expressly forbidden by Bowie's management, and we got into some considerable trouble because he did that. But bless him, it was one of the most rock and roll things that I've ever seen anyone ever do in my life, and that was one of the great memories of Cush as well as the band. But my number one would be probably we were lucky enough to do a tour of Egypt via the British Council, and one of the shows was up on the Med Coast, up by Alexandria, and we played the gardens of this amazing palace, and the gardens curved down to the sea, and it was just a pure joy to be there, just visually. I don't remember what the gig was like, probably not very good, but just the experience of being there in this bizarre, very weird situation has always stayed with me as a sort of major memory.
Paul and Swill, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for
inviting us.
It's enjoyable.
Thanks,
Brilliant.
guys.
It rained from June until July. In August we lit out for the equator. I sold my red guitar, Joey sold a red hot car. We crossed the channel hidden in a freighter. We hitched a lift to Leon in an open mini moke. A drunken driver took us to Marseille. I could say bonjour, Joey knew the law. The rest we memorized along the way. Everything we'd said, everything we'd done, every check we'd saved, every hand we'd won, we put it all on a place in the sun. Every scheme we'd set, every crooked bet, we came to find a place in the sun.
Well, thank you for listening to this episode of the Uncharted 80s podcast. As you know, we do our research from a variety of sources. You want to add any more details to what we've talked about, then you can, of course, contact us. Where can they contact us, Noel?
Well, they can contact us on our email address, which is podcast@uncharted80s.com.
Brilliant. Or you can do that via our Facebook group, the Uncharted 80s. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thank you.